Has your fish ever looked like this? Well, then unfortunately, you've dealt with dropsy before, or as we also call it, pineconing, or in some cases, Malawi Bloat. So what exactly is dropsy? What can we do to prevent it? And how can we help our fish that unfortunately still get this really nasty disease? If you or someone you know has unfortunately had to deal with dropsy in their fish, leave me a comment down below. Let me know what you did for treatment, what brought it on. Were you successful in saving the fish? Because unfortunately, it's very hard to save a fish with dropsy if you don't catch it soon enough. So dropsy is caused by a bacterial infection or a viral infection normally. Now, that's not always the case, and sometimes it can be a metabolism issue or a nutritional disorder, just unfortunately some underlying genetic order. And if it's the last one, there's not much you can do to prevent it or save your fish's life. So symptom-wise, what are we looking at when our fishes have dropsy or get dropsy? Now, usually you'll see a swollen belly. The protruding scales, or pineconing as the term has been coined, is the telltale sign. If your fish has what looks like a pine cone as a body, then your fish 100% has dropsy. You can see a reddening at the base of their fins. There could be ulcers in their bodies, which are just red spots all over their scales. You could see long and pale poop coming out of your fish. So if you see long, white, stringy poop, that could also be a sign. Your fish may not go for their food. There could be a darkening in their coloration, pale gills. They could develop what looks like Popeye as well. There could be a fluid accumulation in their body, and then discoloration of their internal organs. So for you fish keepers that have fish that are more see-through, you can see like a change in what their organs look like. The retaining of fluids is what's going to cause their abdomen area to swell. So what causes this condition in our little fishes? Well, dropsy is normally caused when the fish are in poor conditions of some case. Now, this could be water conditions. So if you don't clean your water regularly, or if you don't have a good enough biological filtration system that keeps that water clean for you, you can end up with fish that get dropsy. There could also be the issue of food. Food is a big thing in this hobby that doesn't get talked enough about. Just like with dogs and cats, there are good fish food, there are middle of the road fish foods, and then there are fish foods that are just terrible that you should not feed. If you go to the pet store, look at the ingredients in your food. If you pick up a can of food and you see a bunch of fillers in it, that is not a good sign. Crappy foods, or what does that mean for a fish food in particular? If you pick up your fish food and the first couple ingredients say fish meal, ground brown rice, fried fish protein, wheat gluten, feeding oatmeal, potato protein, soybean oil, and then finally after like the third line of ingredients, you finally get into things like organic kelp or Atlantic krill meal, garlic, things that actually sound edible. That's when you know you have a not so good food. What do I mean by a middle of the road food? If while you're reading your package, those things start to appear in the first couple of lines, but not at the very start. So you pick up your thing, and the first thing is fish meal, krill meal, cuttlefish meal. Then you get into things like brewer's yeast, wheat starches, and things of that nature. That's when you have like a middle of the ground food, which are usually okay to feed our fish. Now, if you're looking to feed your fish top of the line primo food, prevent this from happening in the first place, you're going to want to go to a fish food that first off the bat is organic kelp, or a krill meal, or has squid meal in it from the start. And on if you're feeding a carnivorous fish, a vegetation eating fish, or another kind of fish. Hi there, as I'm editing this, I seem to have realized that when I filmed this, I completely forgot what the word for herbivore and omnivore were. So that's 100% what I mean here when I say vegetation eating fish and other fish. I'm talking about herbivores and omnivores because obviously those two kinds of fish are going to have completely different dietary requirements from a fish that just eats carnivorous food. For those that don't know, most of our fish are omnivores. They mostly eat bugs in the wild, but they also eat vegetation growing on rocks and things. So that's where the little slip up came from. Not sure why it happened, but you know, enjoy the rest of the video. But you're going to want to look for those normal foods like herring meal, whole sardine meal, spirulina, kelp, krill. Those are the things you really want to look for in a high quality food, which is going to prevent this from happening. So what happens is when you feed your fish a bad or not so good food, they do develop this bloating issue from malnutrition. So you've done all you can and the inevitable happens, and you do unfortunately have to deal with dropsy in your fish. Well, what do you do now that it's happened? First, what you're going to do always, if a fish is sick, water change. Make sure the water in your tank is clean and not got a bunch of gunk in it. Because again, besides the food, the biggest cause is poor living conditions. Pull that infected fish out, get it in the hospital tank, Something small but not too small where the fish is going to suffer more and be stressed even more. Add some aquarium salt. Throw in a couple of catappa leaves or something that's botanical in nature. Release some tannins into that water if the fish can handle it. That's going to automatically act as a natural de-stressor and a natural healing agent. Do a water change. Do a bunch of small ones like 10-20% for a few days. Do a big one. Do a 50% change. It all depends on what kind of tank you have. Once you've done the water change, you still want to isolate this fish. Because if it is a viral infection or a bacterial infection, you don't want your other fish getting it. Stress. When you move a fish out of your tank, it's going to be stressed. I would suggest using a water conditioner that has some kind of de-stressing agent in it, like an API stress coat, personally is what I would prefer, or also adding a little salt to the water to help. Because the conditions that cause this are so uncertain, it is extremely hard to give a standard of care when treating this disease. So the best thing to do is, again, remove that fish, separate it out, give them a good quality food. If you don't want to purchase a high quality food just for one sick fish, go to your local pet store, say, hey, do you have any samples of this food? Personally, I would say look for a North Fin food. They're pretty much top of the line, or a bug bite food. Either one of those I would suggest as a high quality food to feed your fish. Switch their water over. Switch their food over. Start one. Get them in that clean water. Keep that water as clean as possible and as good as you can. If after a few days you don't see their health improve at all, that's when you break out the big guns. So if after like 3 days you don't start seeing a big improvement in your fish's health, this is when you need to add medication. This is another reason we say go to a smaller tank so you don't go through too much med. You're going to want to use a Maracyn-Two. If you can't get Maracyn-Two, go with a Maracyn. The reason I suggest Maracyn-Two is because it is slightly stronger and handles more of the underlying conditions in your fish, and it's sort of specifically designed to deal with dropsy. The real difference between Maracyn and Maracyn-Two is that Maracyn-Two specifically is made to deal with dropsy along with Popeye, fin rot, and gill disease, which is kind of a secondary effect to dropsy. Other one just is erythromycin, and it doesn't deal as strongly against the symptoms of dropsy. That's why I would suggest those two personally. If you have more questions about fish medications, I did a whole video on that. I will link it at the end of this one. While you're doing all this for the fish that is sick, keep an eye on all your other fish, because if one fish gets dropsy and it happens to be a bacterial or a viral infection, it could already be in your tank. If you notice other fish starting to do the symptoms, nuke the whole tank with a medicine. Go in there with a good medicine and just nuke the whole tank. Hopefully this video has helped you understand how you can deal with dropsy, Malawi Bloat, pineconing, whatever you want to call it. If you found it helpful, please remember to leave a like on it, share it out to some friends. Maybe it can help other people get this information spread around the internet. As always, thank you all for the support, and I will see you in the next video.